Welcome to episode number 258 of Destination Linux. Whether you're brand new to open source or a guru of sudo, this is the podcast for you. My name is Ryan.
I'm Jill.
And I'm Michael.
Hey, Michael, where's the whole mustache thing from the 30s where you're all like sophisticated and such? What happened?
Well, you see, people, what happened is we were recording this episode a little bit earlier than usual. We typically do it on 1 p.m. Eastern on Sundays, and we didn't do it this week because of Christmas reasons.
No, because Matrix Eve. It's
Well,
Matrix
that's because
Eve.
it is currently Matrix Eve. That's true.
Yeah.
But because of that, I didn't really have time from like work time to. For those who don't know, a handlebar takes a lot of effort to make because you have to like train it to sit in a certain way. It's a lot of effort. So sometimes the episodes will be distinguished, sometimes they won't. It just depends on how much time I have before the show.
Well, darn it. I missed the handlebar mustache thing already. Jill, I missed the sophisticated Michael.
The sophisticated.
We're just going to have to deal with the very basic Michael this week. But thankfully, while we're dealing with basic Michael, we have just off camera, piped in directly from Jitsi, our glorious community of fact-checking, ego-busting patrons, because it's kind of a patron-only show this week since we're doing it on Tuesday, Matrix Eve. So
special.
Welcome, patrons. And on this week's episode of Destination Linux, we're going to take a look back at this year in Linux. There has been so many amazing things that have taken place in Linux this year, and we're going to discuss them and highlight them and maybe even get into what we're looking forward to in 2022. And all of this with our software picks, tips and tricks coming up right now on Destination Linux.
This week, our community feedback comes from our forums, where Short Femmes Tall People asks the question, why use an advanced distro? So he says, just to preface, I'm not a huge computer geek. I use Linux for editing photos, videos, audio, graphics, and surfing the web. And I like it for the security, and I'm a big fan of open source software. I settled on Ubuntu Mate, and with Flatpak, I was able to get the latest of all the programs I use. I hear all the time more advanced distros and how you will eventually want to switch to them. From my point of view, I don't see why you would need to switch for something that you can have, you can just power on and get to your work, and that's it. That's all you have to do. You don't have to constantly tweak things. I'm not pointing fingers or trying to make a statement. I just want to know why would you want to try out something more advanced? And this is a very interesting question because I have a feeling that Ryan chose it specifically to talk about Arch Linux. Is that the reason?
Me? No, of course not. No, I think this is a really interesting topic because when you think about when you're getting into Linux and you're starting out with, a lot of people start with Ubuntu or something, maybe a Mint, something like that. And then they have this pressure, because I know that happened with me in the 30 days of Linux, where people were like, oh, you got to try this, you got to try this, you got to try this. And then they want to keep moving and trying these other things out there like Arch or more sophisticated distros. And there's a lot of learning experience that comes with that. There's a lot of advantage that can come as a new person going through and doing that. But at the end of the day, Pop! OS, for instance, or Fedora, or any of these distros that are also very welcoming to new people, have a ton of very professional developers working on them and using them every single day that are more professional than the people who are telling you to use Arch or use Gentoo or anything else. They do more advanced things in those distros, and those people probably do. A lot of those people do. So what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, just because a distro is beginner friendly doesn't mean it's also not expert friendly as well, and somewhere you'd want to stay in. So I don't think there's a push to or need for you to go to a more advanced distro. Use the distro that you love, that you get the most work done, the most productivity done in. And yes, I love things like Arch, and I think it's a good learning experience for a lot of people, and it's also a great experience outside of learning, just something you want to stick with if you like it. But if you want everything done for you and you want a distro that you can just get in, turn on, and get to work, there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, there are a lot of times where I've gone away from Arch just because, I don't want to maintain anything and I just want stuff to turn on and work and go. And there's a use case for both of those scenarios in my mind.
Absolutely. I think that's great points. And I do think I agree that there's no real need to do advanced distros. If you have a distribution that you already like and it's working great for you, then fantastic. There's no incentive other than you just want to do it. But I do think there is a lot of people talking about how that you should use this distro. Or for example, there was I've seen this way too many times about like you're not a real Linux user unless you use blah insert blank or whatever, or you're not a real Linux user if you use this particular distro or whatever. All of that is nonsense because the distro, no matter what distro you're using, it's using Linux as the kernel. Then you're a Linux user. That's the important thing. So I think that's just, absolutely nonsense. But I do think if you want to use an advanced distro, you're going to get some value from it by, learning how the system works. So if you're going to install Gentoo or Arch, you're going to learn a lot more than you would do so with Ubuntu or Pop! OS or Ubuntu Mate or whatever those kinds of distros. You're going to get a lot of value from not having to do that stuff. But if you want to learn it, those are great. Those other distros are great for that purpose. Personally, I use Fedora because I don't want to do that stuff. And I already have done it in the past, which it was useful to do for me anyway. But I'm at a point where I don't really want to deal with that if I don't have to. So I use distros that don't force me to do that sort of stuff. So it just depends on your preferences. And no matter what distro you pick, you're going to have whatever experience you want to get. And that is fantastic. So Jill, we know that you have used basically every distro that's ever been created.
But the biggest Arch fan, you can never get her to stop talking about Arch. I'm almost sick of hearing it.
Yeah, kind of worse than you, Ryan. I mean,
bringing up Arch all the time.
Well, it turns out, short films, tall people, I am using Ubuntu Mate right now to prove a point.
Nice.
There you go.
I'm using it for broadcasting right now. And you can dig deep and make Ubuntu Mate really as advanced as you want. If you want to learn how to compile your own apps, you can. You can do that with any Linux distro. And you don't need a distro like Arch, Slackware, or Gentoo to become an advanced Linux user.
Very true.
And it is nice to learn the Slackwares, the Arches, or the Gentoos, to learn how to build packages and go that route. But you are not required to.
Yeah, those are distros if you want to force yourself to learn these.
Yeah.
Well, once you come over here, you're going to stay anyway. So yeah, just come over here and dabble in the Arch world and just see what it's about, and then go back to your regular distro. No, I think you can use whatever you want, but there is a point though in certain software, because he mentioned video editing, sound editing, those type of things. There are distros that do better with those things.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so in that case, it's not about being an advanced or non-advanced distro, but it would be about, for instance, the work that Ubuntu Studio's done or Fedora's done with Pipewire, for instance. If you're into the audio pieces, these are things that you may want to look at for an option for you to utilize as you're wanting to do very specific tasks with the distro that you're targeting here. And so in that case, you may want to look at something that's more or even less technically advanced, depending on what packages it has, based on what the needs are of the work you're going to be doing on that machine.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And also it kind of reminds me of like this thing I've seen a lot of people say, like Linux is Linux and the distros don't matter or whatever. That is ridiculous nonsense.
No.
The distros do matter, just like the example Ryan gave where Fedora has Pipewire by default. And if you want Pipewire in other distributions, it's a lot harder to get. And in some distributions, you install Pipewire and you don't actually get Pipewire. You get this like stripped down version that's basically not even remotely the same thing. Yeah. It's just like there are situations where the distro does 100% matter depending on what you want to do. So that's just kind of goes along like the difference between the advanced distributions and the the average user or the beginner user distributions and that sort of stuff. There's so many different variations, which is one of the best things about Linux with the amount of choices we have. And on top of that, I have recently got an ultra wide, which I'm not really sure if I like an ultra wide. I know that's weird to say because a lot of people are like,
loved it, and now you're complaining about it. And I almost bought one, and thankfully you complained about it right before I bought one. So now I don't want one. I'm going to wait to find out what this annoyance you have with it's all about.
Well, it turns out I with an ultra wide, if you don't have tiling, I think that tiling is very important when ultra wide because I like to have my, like for those who you can't see right now because the monitor is underneath the camera, but I'm on the far right of the monitor because of how like kind of like being able to position everything is kind of awkward with a single ultra wide. So I started looking at different tiling options that are available to me because of like I was saying, the choices that you have for different distributions and also different desktop environments. environments.
i3, i3. Sorry.
You have a cold or something? Is it? Oh.
Yeah, coming down with something.
Yeah, seems like it. Seems like it. There's some things I tried. I've used various different tiling window managers for that purpose, but I like a desktop environment experience. And so I tried Ubuntu Budgie's tiling window shuffler thing. Also, I tried some tiling extensions inside of GNOME, and there's a lot of cool options that you can try out. But I really like how Ubuntu Budgie's window shuffler works. It's just it's not very intuitive how the shortcuts function, but overall it does allow you to have a lot of customization, and I could see myself using that feature quite a lot. And I think Ubuntu Budgie is a fantastic option for those who want to try out a Budgie desktop, because I do think it's a very nice distribution. But I did notice that when I was using other things, I would constantly go like, "Oh wait, I'm not in Plasma. I'm not in Plasma." And it just
you left KDE. Is that what we're getting out of this story?
Oh no! Well, I mean, like right. I mean, right now.
KDE's done now. Michael and KDE have broken up. This is like Brad Jelena news here. This is huge.
Let me clarify, Ryan. I am currently in Plasma, but in my testing purposes, I had felt the issue of like not having. But there are.
So what's the solution then?
Honestly, I think that the more testing would be needed for the different tiling features. And I know that the next version of Plasma is going to have like a center your window on your screen, which would be very nice on an ultra wide, but it doesn't currently have it. So you have to manually adjust things, and it's not very quick for my workflow yet. So I have a couple of options to me, which are not have an ultra wide and get rid of it and get another one, like a non ultra wide version, or try, keep trying to look at like different ways to do the tiling approach. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because you try out different things and you're experiencing, this is more of like an advanced thing, having to, configure all these different things. It's not an average user would even typically have an ultra wide. You have to go out and purposefully get an ultra wide, right? So there are some times where you try out something new and it's fantastic and you love it, and sometimes you try out something new and you realize maybe it's not for you. And
like the handlebar mustache.
No. No. The handlebar mustache was amazing and everybody loves it. So I don't know what you're talking about. But it's just to say that whether an advanced distro is great for you or not, that doesn't matter, because if you have a system that you enjoy, you have hardware you enjoy, then that's fantastic. And also Plasma is fantastic. Just had to say that because it's.
Don't try to say that now. Don't try to like get in the graces of Plasma again now that you've broken up with Plasma and you're a Budgie fan. By the way, while you're in GNOME, because I know you're trying that out too, Gtile is one of my favorite tiling extensions in GNOME. So
I like Gtile, but I didn't like how it required the mouse too much as it did. But there was one that was
nothing like i3. I mean, i3 is it. So
i3 is nice. I do like it. Also, Awesome. I like Awesome. Xmonad were good tiling systems, but they're just great. They're good for their purpose, but they're not like what I want. And it's just I am very picky, apparently. And
you know what you might like, Michael, is I did a hybrid of i3 and XFCE together where you have the whisker menu, but you have all the i3 tiling. It's out there on my GitHub, something you could play with. It's a Frankenstein, but man, it's kind of fun to play with because you get a little both worlds. You got your clicky, nice whisker menu with the search function if you want it, and you got all the i3 functionality there if you're feeling in the tiling mood.
That does
do a little hybrid.
That does make me want to. I am very tempted to try that. So I might, get the whisker menu set up and twist my whisker of the handlebar. And,
there we go.
What is happening?
Or you can try rat poison, Michael, and then you don't have to worry.
You don't have to worry about the mouse. That's true.
Yeah,
I think rat poison is a fantastic window manager. Not because of what it does. It's not that's not great for most people. Not having a mouse is not very intuitive for sure for a lot of people. But the name of getting rid of a mouse and calling that window manager rat poison just well done. Just well done.
Well, speaking of well done, our community, they do a great job making great topics out there on our forums like this that drive lots of conversation. As you can see, very simple question, but drove lots of conversation in the community. And we invite you to go to dlnforum.com and join in on those discussions. Or you could be a part of the worldwide community, have your email heard here too. You get your official
Yeah.
DLN mug, fill it with some coffee or bubbly. You sit down in your nearest stool if you're a child, a chair if you're an adult, and you send an email to comments@destinationlinux.org. And if you include something about how great I am or how much you love Arch, it's definitely going to get read on the show. Okay, that's not a requirement, but I wanted to say that anyways.
Of course you did,
Aw.
because if I mention Plasma too much, he has to mention Arch too much. It's just like an automatic, you know.
It's like a thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's just how it is.
It's okay. I love Window Maker. That's my default.
Is that your default as Window Maker?
Yeah.
Well, you know what I love, Jill? DigitalOcean. And DigitalOcean is sponsoring this episode of Destination Linux. And now is the perfect time to dive into DigitalOcean. Their new app platform service helps you build modern cloud-native apps for way less money. With that platform, you could build, deploy, scale apps and static websites faster and easier than ever using a simple, intuitive interface. In fact, I wanted to show Michael, who's playing in WordPress. I'm like, have you tried Ghost, the power of Ghost? He's like, I haven't played with it recently. So I went into DigitalOcean. I dropped a droplet, put Ghost up, and boom, was able to show Michael immediately the power that is Ghost. I mean, he knew most of it, but still, the point is I was able to prove it to him that I could do it so easily, and I was able to do that because of DigitalOcean.
That's true.
With-
DigitalOcean is also makes it super easy with the marketplace, and those one-click apps is just fantastic.
The one-click apps are the greatest thing ever. I always, when I go into DigitalOcean, look and see if there's a one-click app available first. And if you have apps that you want to deploy, you simply point the app platform to your GitHub or GitLab repository. Let it do all the heavy lifting for you. Whether you're using Node.js, Python, Go, PHP, Ruby, static sites, Docker, container images, it doesn't matter. They can run it all. And by running app platform on their own infrastructure, DigitalOcean keeps your costs significantly lower than other products. The best part about this is since you are a listener to Destination Linux, DigitalOcean is partnered with us to give you a $100 credit to try this service out. So if you go to do.co/DLN, that's do.co/DLN, you're going to get a $100 credit to drop tiny little droplets at $5 or one gigantic server droplet if you want to test out this service. And we want to thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode of Destination Linux. There are so many amazing things that have happened in Linux in 2021. When I was going through and thinking back for this show about all of the awesome stuff that has come out in 2021, this is, I don't want to say the year of Linux. That's the worst thing you can say because it's been overdone, but I feel like Linux is bigger, badder, and better than ever. The amount of attention that Linux has received everywhere by itself, just looking at the attention of the type of YouTubers and content creators and things that are looking at Linux seriously for the first time since I've been in Linux in such a huge way, the amount of businesses that are utilizing Linux and open source software out there more than ever. 2021 has been amazing for Linux. I want to talk to you, Jill and Michael, about your thoughts on this. What are some of the things when you look back at 2021 that stand out to you the most? Because it's one thing to say, hey, it's bigger and better than ever, but prove it to me. Jill, prove it to me. Why has 2021 been one of the greatest years for Linux in your mind?
Linux turned 30. That was huge. It is 30 years old. And its growth every year is just exponential, not just with market share numbers, but with jobs growth, which is really incredible. And this year we definitely hit a turning point in the doubling effect that's been happening year to year.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that while Linux every year gets better and better, the fact that it's been around for as long as it, a lot of people don't even know that it's been around for 30 years if they're brand new to Linux, of course. But it's to note, you were talking about how the YouTubers are getting into it. They don't realize, how much work has been put into the platform and the ecosystem to get it to where it is. And it has been a roller coaster of an experience if you've been on it for a long period of time, like Jill and I have. You even Ryan, you've been on it for like 5 years now. You've seen it.
Yeah.
It's gotten some like crazy stuff happening, and just this year has a lot of crazy stuff. So the 30 years of Linux is a very important thing to note, and I think it's very important. I'm glad we put it right at the beginning because that is a very big milestone to put
Absolutely.
there. And I also want to put in the fact that we have a lot of really cool stuff that was announced, like hardware that was announced this year, software that was announced this year. And Ryan, you mentioned earlier in the show Pipewire, and that has to be my favorite thing that I've been playing with. I mean, you have more experience with it now, so I want you to talk about like how you set up the patron room to be able to listen and talk back during the show.
Well, that's what I think is amazing about Pipewire is the fact that it worked with things like Jack and Carla and these other tools that people are familiar with. So I was able to use QJack CTL, which is running in the background. You've got Pipewire running, you've got QJack, and then I have Carla. And basically, I'm using that to pipe in Jitsi into this room here, which we're recording in Video Ninja. So it's piping all that audio in so the patrons can hear us and they can interact with us after the show. And they can also see video as well. So I'm sharing video in there. And some of this stuff is done through hardware, but that particular piece is done through software and Pipewire. And I run Pipewire in Arch, but of course, the people who've really been pushing Pipewire forward a lot has been Fedora and kind of pushing the boundaries of it and seeing what it's capable of and what it's doing. But the professional audio capabilities on Linux has been a thing that is one of those items where if somebody was like, oh, I'm an audio professional, and they wanted to come to Linux in the years past, I was kind of like, you better learn Jack because that's where you're going to need to be. Now, if you had just regular consumer equipment, the audio has always been great in Linux. But when you get into the professional stuff, that's where there's been some problems. But when we talk about Pipewire being amazing and stuff, you also have to look at the hardware side, which you mentioned for a second, and the audio equipment that now is supported on Linux that wasn't before. I was able to go out to the store, buy a Behringer X1204, plug it into my computer, boot Linux, and it recognizes it right away. I was able to get a Scarlett and do the same thing. I was able to get the other one, I was going to say Focusrite, but that's the Focusrite Scarlett. But there was another model that I had before that I was trying. When I first started 4 or 5 years ago in Linux, and I took one of the boxes and I plugged it in. It was a mixer. It did not recognize it at all. I could not get it to work. I had to go on forums and find what special mixer actually worked with Linux and all that type of stuff. But you don't have to do that as much today. And I think when we think about 2021, when you look at the Linux kernel announcements and you look at all the hardware partners that are enabling their hardware each and every time a new Linux kernel comes out, that type of stuff takes things like Pipewire to a whole new level. Because what's Pipewire if you can't run any equipment through it? So, I mean, all of those things together is what has created a fantastic 2021. And all the developers, amazing developers and community members out there supporting these projects to make it possible.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a very important part. And also, like with my mixer, I just plugged it in and it worked. And having like being able to plug in the cameras and right to the USB, and then you're done. And that's that kind of thing that is being possible from the support and the hardware, and it just constantly gets better. That's one of the things about, like you said earlier about the joke about how the year of the Linux desktop has been said for a long time. The important part about that is that a lot of people don't recognize what every single year the Linux desktop is improved. And it's improved in a dramatic way, in a drastic way. And it makes things like there's people talking about how they are trying to get, when they install a Windows, they have to get drivers installed for their CPU. Like, why can't they just, as they're installing, get in? Like, you don't have to do that with Linux because it's in the kernel. The Intel drivers are built into the kernel. The AMD drivers are built in the kernel, and it's just super nice, and it gets better and better. And that's a great point about like the hardware and the software working together to make this stuff possible has gotten just so much better, especially with this year and especially with Pipewire.
Oh, definitely. Well, I want to let everyone know that I am using a DigiDesign MBox 2 Mini USB interface. That interface has been deprecated on Windows and Mac OS, and it doesn't work on those OSs. It's an older interface that literally cost almost over $1,000 in the mid-2000s, and it is plug and play on Linux. And I got it for $20 on eBay.
That's awesome. That's
so you
awesome.
can bring in, that is what's so amazing, yes, is Linux has become the most plug and play OS in the world, and it really has.
Yeah. The other one I was thinking of was called PreSonus. That was the other interface
the
that I had that
PreSonus.
worked
Yeah.
out of the box
Those are good.
with
yeah.
Linux, which was absolutely amazing in itself. So all of these devices, all working, plug and play, everything's working great. That doesn't happen, by the way, on an Apple. A lot of people talk
Yeah.
about Apple having this extraordinary interface, and there are great things about Apple. Believe me, there are some really good refinement and things they have. But it shocks me to this day about Apple being one of the best known for audio production and things, because there is so much extra software you have to buy to do things that are built in to Linux operating system by itself. If you want to be
And they're
doing OBS and
expensive.
doing additional recordings, and it's very expensive.
Very
And that's all
expensive.
built into
Yeah.
Linux. And I was shocked.
Exactly.
I have videos where I bought all this Mac equipment and I was doing those tests, and I was shocked because I thought, my gosh, I see all these YouTube creators and they're doing all this audio stuff in Apple, and they're doing it by spending all this money on extra software to do the things built into Linux. So
Yeah.
if we can get Pipewire where it needs to be and get it expanded out and show people what's capable here, this is going to be another area where Linux is going to dominate. Because we know we've already got Apple on the ropes when it comes to gaming. I mean, come on. Boy, have we really done some awesome stuff in gaming, though. Think about Proton and the Steam Deck.
Steam Deck.
Can I get an amen on the Steam Deck right here? I mean,
Absolutely.
amen. on the Steam
Amen.
Deck.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
can't wait to get my Steam Deck. And Proton is a wonderful thing that it's been around for a couple of years, but the latest this year has just gotten so much better. Like basically any game I want to play is available in Proton at this point. And to be fair, I don't play that many games, but every time I've tried to play a different game, it has been available just out of the box. And it's well after you turn on Proton, then out of the box, and it's fantastic. And I am such a huge fan of the work that the Codeweavers team is doing on Proton, and Steam and Valve are working on Proton. Just such a cool thing.
The
And
Lutris team.
the Lutris
Yeah.
team working on stuff. Yeah, it's
Matthew
amazing.
Commandant.
Yeah, in fact, we had the founder of Lutris on Destination Linux episode 255 for an interview if you learn more about Lutris. So check that episode out. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of great stuff that, so thank you to all the people who are working on the gaming stuff, because as some people might not know, gaming is what pushes the performance of a system as like to its max. And it's such an important thing because when you're fixing something for gaming, you're also fixing it for everybody else.
Absolutely.
You're making your graphics drivers stack so much better, and the OS is running better, whether it be with the Mesa drivers or NVIDIA. It's just improving everything all around.
You know what shocked me this year when I was thinking about it was the fact Fedora showing its ability to build an amazing desktop user experience. Now, I don't mean to insult the Fedora folks when I say this, but when I started in Linux 5 years ago, Fedora was not a good desktop experience for me. Let me just put it that way. It was not great. But back then, everybody was talking about Ubuntu and those type of things, and they were fantastic, and they filled that void. But who's picked up that mantle in the last year has been Fedora for me.
Yeah.
Like Fedora has
Absolutely.
just
Definitely.
absolutely stepped out of the shadows and shown that they are ready to take on the desktop space in a big way and contribute back into the desktop user experience in a big way. And so it's very easy for me to recommend Fedora today to people wanting to try out Linux. And the things like Pipewire, for instance, that they're pushing through there, they're pushing the boundaries of what can be done in Linux. And even what they're pushing with Wayland and things, so that this stuff gets done and we're not talking about it again 10 years from now. We're pushing it forward. We're going to put it in there. We're going to fix the problems. We're going to do it live. And that's what Fedora is doing there. And they're doing such a great job of it. And that to me has been a huge change in my Linux journey, watching Fedora go from I guess professional people use it sometimes, to, oh my gosh, I want to use this at home and at work.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I mean, bringing up Fedora is actually really close to my experience, because I switched to Fedora as my daily driver this year. I mean, it was a little bit of last year too, but I've experienced it throughout this year, and it is such a good desktop and experience, and just a good user experience overall. And it's funny you mention it, because You said earlier that when you first got into Linux, that Fedora was not a great experience for you, and I'd have to say around that period of time, it wasn't a great experience for me either. But it's kind of funny.
Core.
Yeah. Well, that's a little bit farther back, but it's funny because of the fact that we've talked about it a couple times on the show, and I've repeated it probably more than people want to hear it. But I'm just gonna say it: the little Ryan on my shoulder telling me to rethink things, try it again. It's probably different now. It's been a year, it's been 5 years, whatever. You haven't tried it your opinion is kind of skewed at this point. And I'm like, oh, Ryan, shush. And then, yeah, just go away. But then I try it, and it's been my daily driver ever since. It's it's fantastic. And I've been testing out all sorts of stuff because of that little Ryan on my shoulder thing. Ugh. But
yes.
Everyone should have a little Ryan on their shoulder. That should be everyone's New Year resolution.
Absolutely.
To have a little Ryan on your shoulder.
I agree. For that particular reason, I agree.
Just that reason.
Just that reason. But I do think Fedora has been like a huge change for the past couple of years based on going back and trying other things. But having Pipewire by default, having ButterFS by default, putting the effort in all these different things. Like, it's got Wire Plumber now. Wayland pushing Wayland efforts. I just applaud the Fedora team for what they're doing.
Well, another company that has an amazing OS that is very progressive and has had a lot of amazing changes this year is System 76 Pop! OS.
Yeah.
And
absolutely,
one of the big things was their announcement of creating their own desktop environment, Cosmic in Rust. So that's
I am so excited about their desktop environment. Like I have these dreams of what it could be, because I feel like today we're in this void where none of the desktop environments are bad. Maybe there's a couple, but barely. They're all pretty good, but they're all just pretty good. Like I need someone to come in there and give that, like, I don't know, that outstanding desktop solid feel. And I feel like it could happen from Pop! OS. It could happen from KDE. We talked about, was it last week, about them kind of taking some looks at refining things. It could happen from GNOME. But I'm really excited that so many people are focusing on that and looking at that and trying to make a better desktop experience, because nobody's quite there yet to providing a really great desktop experience that I think people who aren't just fans like us would fall in love with. And so I'm very excited about that. And System 76 making their own keyboard here in the
absolutely.
US.
The launch keyboard. Yay.
And of course, building their own desktop machines that are absolutely gorgeous. For the first time in like 25 years, I was like, maybe I won't build my own machine. Maybe I'll get this one, because the wood grain and the way they built the cooling and the engineering they did behind it, it's genius, the work that they're doing over there at System 76. And I think Pop! OS is an absolute standout distribution out there for people to check out in its own right, for sure.
Totally agree.
Yeah, Ryan. And like you were saying, it's not just the software, it's the hardware. They're trying and open sourcing the BIOS and all the work they have gone through, the engineering of that, and making Linux better as a result of it, and getting more driver support on Linux.
Yeah, and
they've done so many amazing things.
Absolutely, it's a great point. I mean, Jill, you brought up the System 76 doing this stuff with Pop! OS and the Cosmic desktop environment. I am so excited about that, because just like Ryan said, the desktop environments we have are great, and there's certain things that are kind of not exactly there with the full polish experience, but they all have like tons of value to them. I actually recently tested out GNOME, and I found some extensions that make GNOME look like magnifico.
Wow, that's a big compliment coming from you.
Well,
dash to panel, dash to dock.
I can't remember the last time he gave a desktop environment Magnifico. They should use that in their advertising. Michael says Magnifico.
When you add extensions, clearly.
Oh,
when you add extensions. The default GNOME, you could lose some more polish.
You need extensions.
Yeah, you need some extensions. But it's just like that extension it's called Blur My Shell. Looks very nice.
Oh, yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. I got a tip from an OpenSUSE talking about like if it'll change your entire experience. I'm like, okay, how can it? Oh, it does. It makes it look really slick. Anyway, so I think that it's really cool that they're doing this desktop environment with Cosmic, because I've been a fan of what they've been doing for most of the stuff they've been doing, really. But the desktop environment space could be improved in a lot of ways. And I think that when the best example was when System 76 announced they were making Pop! OS, there was so much people going like, "Oh, no, just another distro. Why are you doing this? It's a waste
just
of time."
theming Ubuntu.
Yeah, exactly. And then they prove without a doubt that they have a reason to make that distro, and it was one of it became one of the distributions that people started recommending for beginners and stuff like that. Like that is a testament to the
And
effort
professionals.
Yeah, so putting that effort into the desktop environment, I can't wait. It's going to be I'm going to be very excited to play with that.
Okay, so when I think of exciting things for 2021, I can't help but think of Pine 64. Has Pine 64 not rocked our world in 2021?
Yeah, exactly.
When you think about the product announcements that came out from them, they're really the only Linux phone out there. Because someone's going to say, no, there's this other one, but no, there's not.
No, there's not.
There's one Linux phone out there that actually makes calls and stuff and acts like a phone, and that's the Pinephone. And then the Pinephone Pro that they launched is amazing, but to me, I can't wait to get my hands on the PineNote, but pretty much say
here.
Pine anything and I want it. Pine has done, I think, incredible things out there. My son walks around with his Pine watch, Pine Time watch, and he loves that in school. And it's got a cool little game on it and stuff too. I mean, it's just so well done. Everything they do is very well done. And what I love is they do the hardware, they release it out to the awesome community, and the community goes in there and makes brilliant operating systems and things on it. Manjaro has done a lot of work with them, done a lot of great work with them, and the Pine. And so those two companies, to me, I'm just over the moon with Pine, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do next year. And hopefully we get some of the exclusives again, because I know it's going to be amazing. You know, like Pine Pro Book Pro 2. I mean, is that a thing? Is that going to happen?
I don't know what they're going to be doing, but I can't wait to see what it is, because just like you, I'm super excited to get the PineNote. As soon as they announced we got the exclusive interview, like Ryan said, you can check out the links in the show notes. We'll have a link for that particular interview, as well as the interview about the Pinephone Pro, because it's just so exciting to be a part of that. And so the PineNote is something that I have been wanting for a long time, and as soon when Pine 64 said they were going to be doing this, I was like, oh, this is going to be fantastic. And the specs look great. The prototypes look great. And the Pinephone Pro, everybody's been wanting the Pinephone Pro, right? As soon as the Pinephone was announced, people were like, well, when we get a Pinephone Pro? I was like, okay, people, have some patience. And it's just the Pinephone just came out. But it was also way faster than I expected. I was expecting 3 or 4 years before we got the Pro. And then all of a sudden this year, Pro's coming. Awesome! I can't wait to try that as well. But there's so many great things that Pine 64 have done that I agree. I basically want everything they have at this point. I got the Pine Time too. It's so impressive. Especially for $30, something like that. I don't know I don't remember what it is, but it's such
insignificant.
It's a few cups of coffee at Starbucks. Don't go to Starbucks; it's not good coffee. But
it's one cup of coffee. You've been to Starbucks lately? Holy moly! It is just really.
You can live in the whole Pine 64 ecosystem for less the price of one computer from Apple or Dell. So
that's a good point. You could have a tablet, you could have a watch, you could have a phone, you could have it all. Right there. Pine's done amazing things for Linux and open source and the community. I'm just so thankful we have them in this community. Some other things that I think kind of are really amazing, but they're forthcoming things, is like the multi-gesture support in GNOME. When I say forthcoming, I mean they're emerging for the Linux world, because people in the Apple ecosystem have had really good gesture support for a long time. Us in Linux have not had such great gesture support for a long time, but GNOME, I feel like, is the one that kind of pushed that forward with their multi-gesture support. There were other apps and things that would do it, but now it's kind of built into the desktop, and I think that is a big win for Linux.
I agree with that.
Absolutely.
The more, the merrier for the gestures for the touchpad and stuff like that, because the multi-touch gesture just makes it so easy to do a lot of things, and it also is a very interesting thing to be able to switch on. Just to be clear, it's not just because it has multi-touch gesture. It's also because you can make your GNOME shell environment work work like a DJ. And I 100% do this all the time for no reason, because you 3-finger swipe it and you can go back and forth between your workspaces. But if you just kind of hold it in between, it's not like it just immediately switches. It's actually moving as you go. So I constantly like...
You're just sitting there thinking, like, what do I want to do next on my computer? Just flipping the...
I might be exaggerating constantly, but it is a lot. I do it. I do it. Every time I turn the laptop on, I always do it. Like, I have to do it. It's just like, for some reason.
Look, we could go on for another hour about what's happened, but I want to drop one more thing because it's big for me personally. There's two things big for me personally. Number one is privacy going mainstream. And this has been huge, I think, this year, and that makes me very happy. But that could be an episode entirely on its own. But also the work that our community has done for charities and things for the Destination Linux Network.
Woohoo.
To me, that has absolutely been fantastic in 2021. We had amazing years before, the stuff that Zeb did and some of the charities we did with Free Geek. And this community always shows just how loving and awesome they are. But I don't think we could close out this segment without giving a huge thanks to all of you for helping us with the Game Fest, the Lug Fest, our patrons always jumping in and helping us when we're not as organized as we should be. And of course, the amazing work that Matt did in his 24-hour stream and raising over $1,000 for St. Jude's Hospital. Those type of things make this work that we do so much more enjoyable. And I appreciate everyone in our community who has contributed to those things and the success of that.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. I can't. I would like to reiterate that, but you said it beautifully. So there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Michael.
One of the other really important things in Linux this year was real quickly is that Linux is on Mars.
Oh yeah.
And it perseveres.
Yeah.
It perseveres.
So, literally. So Linux is not only on the Perseverance rover, but on Ingenuity, which is a tiny helicopter that was used to attempt the first powered flight on any planet other than Earth. Woohoo!
Yeah. Awesome.
Yes.
And, this was the first for their OS on space missions, although, of course, Linux was used in the creation and launch of the mission here on Earth in the first place.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
That's
now
a great point.
There.
Yeah. Linux, I'm wearing a shirt that says Linux is everywhere, and that includes Mars.
Are there even
Absolutely.
apples in space? We know you can't have windows open.
Yeah.
Woo! Yeah, looks like we win space too.
We win space too. And also, just real quick, we talked about all the things that's happening for Linux, in like a year-in review sort of thing. But let's, Destination Linux also had a cool year as well. So we had interviews with Luchers, like I mentioned earlier, but also we had Red Hat Scott McCarty on episode 253.
Yeah.
We had the Vivaldi CEO on episode 243.
That blew me away.
Right?
Like I did not
That was
expect to love Vivaldi at that moment as much as I did, but after talking with him, I just kind of fell in love with Vivaldi. That's what I love about some of these interviews.
We also had on episode 232 the CTO of SUSE, Gerald Pfeiffer, joined us. We learned a lot about SUSE and what they're doing at OpenSUSE.
And he sent us plushies.
And
Yes. We got lots of
exactly. You see it?
plushies.
Like we got the Geeko right here.
He knows how to win us over.
Yep.
He sent us plushies.
That's how you do it.
We can be bought.
Send us some swag, and you can be on the show.
Right.
We also had the interview with Neil McGovern from GNOME for our
that was
episode
awesome.
218. So much great stuff. We'll have links to all of these in the show notes. But I just wanted to say, like, if you're new to the show, there's a ton of great content that you might have missed that you should definitely go check out, and we'll have links to all of that in the show notes.
You know what also was great this year, Michael?
What's that?
Bitwarden.
Bitwarden, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Bitwarden has been great for so many years, including this year, and they're also so great because they are a sponsor of this here podcast. So this episode of Destination Linux is brought to you by Bitwarden. Get started right now with your free account at bitwarden.com/DLN. Bitwarden is an awesome password manager. It allows you to have peace of mind knowing that your online accounts are secure. It gives you multiple tools to do this. So you have a secured vault where you can store all your passwords. You have an auto generator where you can generate your passwords automatically. And you can also automatically fill in those passwords in login forms so you don't have to do any of this stuff. Why would you create this is password I need to remember? No, you don't. Put it in Bitwarden, you're good to go. You can access also all this data across many different types of devices, whether it's your web browser, mobile applications, desktop applications, options, even the command line if you want to do it. And Bitwarden seals and encrypts your private data with end-to-end encryption before it ever leaves your devices. So no matter what device you want to use it on, it's creating this encryption locally on those devices, so you know you're the only person with access to your data, which is a super important point about privacy and security, because that is just one of the reasons why Bitwarden is awesome. And another reason is because Bitwarden embraces open source and embraces Linux, which is just another reason why we love Bitwarden. So go to bitwarden.com/DLN to make the smart move like many from the community have and get your account today at Bitwarden. And also, you can get the premium account for less than $1 per month. That's
Why
right.
wouldn't you?
Less than $1 per month.
Use all of them dumb gift cards you're going to get in Christmas that for all these stores and just trade them in for a Bitwarden account.
Exactly. You get so much more value with Bitwarden, for sure.
Exactly.
You get 1 gigabyte encrypted file storage, 2-step login with YubiKey, U2F Duo, Vault health reports, Bitwarden authenticator for temporary one-time passwords. You remember Firefox Send? Well, they got rid of it, unfortunately, but Bitwarden Send now exists, so check that out.
Yeah.
You also get priority customer service, so much more, all of this for less than $1 per month. So make the smart move like many of the community have and go to bitwarden.com/DLN to get started. And thanks again to Bitwarden for sponsoring Destination Linux. So we're talking about the history of Linux and what the year in review. Let's talk about the future of Linux. And you can't talk about the future without thinking about like where is Linux going to be for the virtual reality, the augmented reality of stuff that's happening. Because there's a lot of technology companies that are working on, pushing forward towards VR and AR. We got Microsoft, Valve, awesome, Logitech, Apple, Google, and many other ones as well. And on the latest episode of Hard Radix, episode 50, we talked about AR and VR and what the current states of these technologies are and where we see them going in the future. And we've got some great news for VR fans out there, because there is already work underway for bringing the Linux desktop into virtual reality. There's such, for example, that we've talked about Collabора's XR desktop on This Week in Linux, and you can check that out linked in the show notes. But also today we've got some more exciting news for Linux in VR, and that is Simula VR. Simula VR? Simula VR.
Simula. Yeah.
Simula VR was brought to our attention thanks to Ulfnick in our community forums, link in the show notes. There are two parts to this. That's what's really exciting, is that not only is it software for the desktop, having a window manager for VR, but also they are making a VR headset that you can use, and I am excited about this. It's not like someone made a piece of hardware, a headset that you could put Linux on. No, this is made for Linux. That is important.
What I think is interesting about this particular headset is the company very clearly out there says, hey, this is not for gaming. So, we have a lot of listeners that love gaming here, but we have a lot of listeners who just want to use their computer for work and developing and that type of stuff. They have no interest in games. And so to them, maybe they've seen all of this VR stuff and things and think, oh, that's just for gamers and things. But this is really focused on the office environment. Yeah. And what this could provide you in an office world is incredible. Imagine being able to have as big of an ultra wide screen as you want, or 5 of them, or 10 of them as you look around your room and have those screens there, but not having to take up all of that space that a monitor would typically take up. And of course, you have the whole minority report idea where you could move screens and things around, but you also have collaboration capabilities with AR, augmented reality, that you could do with folks if you're collaborating on certain projects and things. You could be looking at the document while talking to them on a conference call. So you look down, you've got an augmented reality version of a document or some plans or maps or things that you're looking at, and you look up, you've got your conference call there. There's a lot of things in my mind that I could see that this type of technology could be used for outside of just games and things. And that's what's really interesting about this is Firefox, LibreOffice, Emacs, Vim, all of these desktop apps, they have that working right now in this headset. Like when you go to their site and they're demoing it, it's there. And it's built on top of the Godot game engine as well. So when we talk about the fact that gaming pushes other things forward, here's an example, right? This is not made for gaming, but gaming pushes this technology forward. That's why it's so impressive. But I also like that they made it compatible with other headsets out there. So if you've already made an investment in an HTC Vive, the Pro, the Valve Index, you can use this software with it as well.
So the company didn't go, oh, we need to make a product and then force people to buy our thing in order to have this,
Proprietary.
like to have a metaverse experience or whatever. They're actually making a product that you can put on something you already have. See, that is, they understand the Linux ecosystem. They understand the community, and that is a fantastic thing.
I was thinking in my mind when I was looking through this, what if Destination Linux next year is all done with Simula One headsets?
Oh,
you've got
interesting.
Jill, you've got me,
Oh, boy.
and we all just have these headsets. So you don't really ever get to see our faces anymore, which kind of removes some of the,
Well, what we could do is
being-
instead we could record it in VR so they could watch it on their Simula ones, so they could look up in there and there's Ryan. They could look up there. There's Jill.
oh my
and
gosh, they
be
could virtually kick you
Yeah.
off a stool like you're right there.
Exactly. They could. There's so
Yeah.
many possibilities you could have
like
with this setup. And you know what's really interesting about the Simula one? To go back to something that actually is a thing that so is there? You go inside the demo. So they have a section where you can activate it, where you can look down and see your everything that is like your desk and your coffee, and they show an example of them like doing stuff where you're still inside the VR, but you can actually still interact. So it's kind of like
That's
a
nice.
Yeah.
So
very
kind of
nice.
cameras on the outside or something to show you what
Yeah.
you're actually seeing.
exactly.
Very cool.
It's like a reverse AR in that sense. Like it's pretty cool. So I thought that was a nice touch that I've not seen on other types of VR approaches, because they're not really made for the office thing. So I think that's like a very clear distinction that they're focusing on. You're in a virtual environment, but you're still also in your environment too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know what I'm looking forward to this for, me being visually impaired. These headsets have never ever worked. And I know there's going to be some innovation in that area. So for those of us that see out of one eye can use the headsets. And but it has so much potential for accessibility. I just see this as such a huge potential. We're just not there yet. And having this now that can be used on Linux, just look at the innovation that the developers are gonna create for this device, the kind of apps they're gonna create. It's huge because it's not just gaming anymore.
Absolutely.
No, that's beautifully said. I think that there's a lot of work that still needs to emerge out of this before this becomes technology that you would say is mainstream.
Yeah.
And maybe something else will come up in between that takes this and does some different spin on it and knocks it out. But the key is that Linux is here while this technology has so many companies investing in it, so many companies who are pushing this, and we're not going to be 5-10 years behind like has happened in the past. We're emerging with this technology, and if it does take off, and these are the headsets and things, and we do find amazing use cases for them, as a lot more people are working from home and those type of things, and virtual environments and building relationships, helping with accessibility issues, those type of issues that we can solve with these. Linux isn't going to be catching up 10 years later with stuff like this. So that's why I'm excited that we're seeing this, and Ulfnick brought it to our attention in the forums, of course, because I think it's awesome to think about the possibility of having these headsets.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of silly yet wonderful games the past few weeks. So this time we're going to cover a more serious game that RPG fans probably already love and adore, and that's Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. So after 20 years, this D&D rule set RPG has been ported to Steam, and you can play it on Linux natively and not just on your PlayStation anymore and your Xbox. So that's just really wonderful. Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance has so many really fun features. It's got a groundbreaking adventure featuring the 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons rule set.
Is 3rd edition a good edition, Jill? I don't play D&D, so I don't know. Is that one of their better editions?
I know that's the one my friends seem to like the most.
Gotcha.
Or one
So
of
it's
them.
I've
Yeah.
never
I know
actually
this-
played D&D, and we need to fix that pretty soon.
We do need to
Yes,
fix that, and I think our
absolutely.
community is going to host a D&D session where we can all make fun of Michael and myself, who
I'm
haven't
excited.
played D&D
I'm excited to
directly.
make fun of you for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to make fun of you. So why aren't we playing D&D already?
Exactly.
I mean, let's make this
Perfect.
happen. Let's make it happen.
Let's make
But
it
this
happen.
game, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, is a beloved gem in the RPG world. This is like
Absolutely.
the Matrix movie of the RPG world for me,
It
because
is.
it's Matrix Eve, so we have to throw that in there.
The other cool thing about it is that it's also a great game for beginners to learn the rules of the D&D franchise because it just plays easily with a mouse and keyboard. It's like
Oh, that's cool.
Torchlight, the Torchlight series of games. It's
I
just
love
really
Torchlight.
easy.
Yeah.
So there's not a complex system to have to learn with the mouse and keyboard. It's just
Nice.
really easy. There's tons of cool things. You've got 3 customizable characters, each with distinctive powers, appearances, and abilities.
Any of them have handlebar mustaches by chance?
Yes, do they? Do they?
No,
'Cause if they
because no
don't-
hero would ever wear such a silly
That's
thing,
not
Michael.
true. All the wood elves
the dwarves
and the
would have
mages.
handlebar mustaches. I think some of the dwarves might.
You're a very tall dwarf, Michael, so that's kind of weird.
Apparently.
So and you can what's cool is you can also battle, play it single player or join a friend in 2-player cooperative mode, which is really
Yep.
cool.
We could play this together, learn the rules of D&D, Michael, and then dominate everyone. They'll think it's beginner's luck, but it's because we played this game and cheated and learned
Yeah.
the rule set beforehand.
I'm not sure that's how D&D works.
Yeah.
Also, but to be fair, I don't know how it works at all anyway, so it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
so we might as well try it. I mean, what's there to lose?
Yeah, who knows?
So have you ever played this game, Jill? I know there's a ton of Baldur's Gate games
I've
out
never
there.
played. I actually haven't played Dark Alliance yet, so I'm looking forward to playing it because I've played a lot of the other Baldur's Gates games.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've played the others. I absolutely love them. They are a gem in the whole series of RPGs out there. And now we can play this because I haven't played them before because they weren't on PC, and now they're on PC and on Linux. So this will be an awesome game to check out.
Yeah, and Linux day 1 too. That is really
Gotta
awesome.
love that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, our software spotlight this week, we talked about the Apple M1, how Linux was ported to it. So I thought I would grab something around that arena. It's not going to be for everybody. Michael suggested this, so if you don't like
That
it, send
is
your comments
not
at
true.
destinationlinux.org.
Not true.
The spotlight this week is UTM. This is a really unique open source application that lets you run virtual machines on iOS devices like your iPhone and iPads. So if you want an Arch distro running on your iPad, check out UTM. You could do it there. There's no jailbreak required for this. And another use case for UTM is for the M1 ARM MacBooks, which is how I actually found out about this program, because the M1 cannot run the VirtualBox on it. It just doesn't work. And they're apparently not going to make VirtualBox work for the ARM laptops in the Apple world. So you can use QEMU, which is what UTM utilizes, or just download UTM, and you can actually run a virtualization of a Linux distro right there on your M1 Mac. Because I know a lot of people in the Linux community got swayed to try out the new ARM processors and things out there. So since it's QEM, it utilizes the TCG accelerator and a Spice client for the Metal side. So I have Debian, for instance, running on the M1 Mac that I have, and it runs really, really well. They've done a fantastic job with it. It has shared directory, clipboard, port forwarding, console modules, and there's over 30 plus processors supported from this software. So if you have an iOS device or the new ARM devices by Apple, check out UTM.
As a Linux user, you may need to see what user groups you are involved in. So if you're included in certain groups, you have different permissions and that sort of stuff. I'm not referring to like lugs or Linux user groups, because it is a Linux user. But instead, I'm talking about your Linux system user in part of different groups for permissions on your systems. So although DLN community is a great group of Linux users, so you should consider getting involved in the forums or the matrix room. Okay, that was a bonus tip of the week, I guess, but the actual tip is related to seeing what groups your user is a part of. So why would you want to do this? Well, maybe for some reason your user can't elevate privileges via sudo. That would be because your user is not in the sudoers group, and you would want to fix that. Check to make sure you can use this tool to do it, and that tool is ID. So to list all of the groups a user is a part of, you simply type ID, the username, and then -p. And if you're wanting to check the current user's group, simply type ID-P. Now, this is there's another command that's called groups that you might have heard before, but ID can give you some other things that groups can't. Like, for example, it gives you access to the numerical values in addition to the names, like the symbolic names, because groups will only give you the symbolic names of the different IDs, not the numerical value. So the numerical value would come in handy for when you're dealing with network shared data, for example, and a lot of other things. So the ID gives you those things. Also, there's a lot more features that you can do and more switches that are available in ID. So if you need to get this kind of information for checking out what groups your user is in, then check out ID, and we'll have all this information in the show notes if you want to check out more details.
And you know what I'm excited about, Jill? In 2022, people are going to be able to go and see you live.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if everything stays the same
Hopefully.
at scale.
Yeah.
If scale is live, unless something happens, because we're in a pandemic world, you never know. But assuming everything goes as expected, March 3rd through the 6th, you could go see Jill at scale in Pasadena, California. And this is the largest community-run open source and free software conference in North America. It's held annually in the greater Los Angeles area. You can go volunteer still, or you could just sign up to be an attendee. But the greatest part is you get to see Jill. I mean, do you need to say more
That's
than
it.
that?
That's all you
Everyone
need.
should travel to go see Jill.
They should just call it the Jill Expo, because that's what
They
it's
really
about,
should.
you know?
I mean, do we need to call it scale at this
Right.
point? Jill's going to be there. We just put Jill on a stage. Everyone comes and sees Jill and then walks
exactly.
away.
That's it. That's all you need. You look for the penguin hat, and then that's it. End of Expo. That's all you need.
End of scale. Yes. But lots of fun events and things there. So go check that out and get more information on scale. And a big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. However you do it, we love your faces. And I also want to wish all of you a very happy holidays and happy new year. We recorded this episode earlier on Tuesday, or as I call it, Matrix Eve, before the new movie comes out. So we
really?
can celebrate
You call it Matrix
the holidays.
Eve? I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, Matrix, the new movie is coming out. That's the whole exciting thing right now. It's not Christmas or the holidays.
That's the first time you
Matrix Eve.
mentioned that today.
Yeah, shocking. So happy holidays to everyone and a happy new year as well.
And also, we are here every Sunday, usually at 1 p.m. Eastern live. So you can go to dealinlive.com. And the best part is that everyone is invited to watch the recording of the show each and every week, unless it's this week, because that's a patron-only thing because of the changing of the... Anyway, you get it. So go to dealinlive.com to check it out every week, Sunday at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And we also have our glorious patrons getting extra perks, and on top of that, being able to check out unedited versions of the show. And we also have them join the Patron Post Show, which is just an awesome time. So you can join us in the 60,000 square foot digital stadium immediately following the show every week. And if you want to become a patron, go to destinationlinux.org/Patreon to sign up. And of course, we also have swag that you can check out because we're so much cool stuff. We got the Destination Linux shirt, Destination Linux mugs, the Linux is Everywhere shirt, so much great stuff.
Great
There's
holiday gifts.
Exactly, holiday gifts. I mean, if you want to celebrate the new year in a great way, you can get some swag for that with hoodies and mugs and stickers and backpacks. So much cool stuff. Dealinstore.com.
And make sure to check out all the amazing shows here on the Destination Linux Network. We have the Sudo Show, This Week in Linux, the DOS Geek Channel, Hardware Addicts, Deal and Extend, Fedora Podcast, GameSphere. So everyone head to destinationlinux.network and subscribe to all these wonderful shows. And don't forget to leave a rating on your favorite app so others can discover the power of open source and keep those penguins marching and the full Monty of Linux and open source awesome sauce.
Everyone have a great week. And remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
We'll see you next week. Probably.
Yes. Yeah.
Depends if it's live or not. But we'll still do the show.
Probably.
But it might not be live. It might be live. It might not be live.
Might be. I don't know.
It
We'll have to see if
We'll
Jill's going to party with us or not.
Yeah, I will. Oh,
But
my
you know
gosh,
what
we
time
did
it is. You know what time it is now, Ryan. It's time
It's
to check.
Matrix Eve.
Yes, it's Matrix Eve. But it's time to go to the patron post show and hang out with the
yes.
patrons.
Absolutely.
Yes. And let's go do that.
Then Matrix Eve.
Yes, and
Yeah.
then Matrix Eve.